Welcome back to another episode of Drag To Amerikkka. I'm your host, Ty Worldwide. Mr. Harry Bell, a community innovator, inspired me to want to look into the poor, neglectful treatments numerous black people endure living in numerous housing facilities. Let's get straight to it. In Bridgeport, Harry Bell has a licensed calling from God to guard and help the youth in urbanized areas. He has a significant impact on the community. Color a Positive Thought was a good idea, and he thought spreading positivity through coloring, a seemingly forgotten art form, was clever. In 2012, he decided to take action and design a clever, one-of-a-kind coloring book aimed at inspiring young people. Mr. Bell developed a method to instill confidence in urbanized children by using crayons to think and color themselves out of the box. Color a Positive Thought appears to be more of a movement than a book. Mr. Bell is the director of a mentoring program in the city's public school, which is desperately needed. Perhaps if Mr. Bell's program had been implemented in public schools years ago, he might have been able to help me when I was subjected to a racist, violent ordeal in a classroom with a teacher present. This was within a public school on State Street years ago. It's wonderful to hear that you care about all youngsters, particularly African American students, so that hopefully no student has to go through what I went through. He has taken the effort to bring attention to the fact that many youngsters require positive mentoring in order to thrive. I thank you, Mr. Ron and Mr. Lee, for showing me what true mentorship looks like. Harry Bell was raised in the projects and had numerous challenges. Mr. Bell spoke of many challenges that plagued his family in the projects on the news. Mr. Bell describes his experience as rough growing up in the projects, which makes me think of the many that are still suffering in the brick plantations today. When some residents in the projects are filled with anger, sadness, and fear, it takes over their mindset. This is a clear result of their situational challenges. Many in power seem to be unconcerned with poverty-stricken areas because they don't have to live there. Many young people from these areas at times can't find a place of comfort. Once that sets in for some, the distraction plantation may begin to change their way of thinking. Numerous young people from the hood see so much and may feel trapped, wondering if they'll ever get out of the cycle. When money is tight, food is scarce, and not many care about the tears, some teens from the hood find other avenues to make a quick dollar. Did anyone ever think maybe some are on the block just trying to feed their family? Many are discouraged. The brick plantations provide just enough for numerous African Americans and others to get by. Some outsiders that may have never seen poverty firsthand say things like, "Why don't they get up and make something happen?" Or, "They're lazy, they want to live off the government all day long." That's frankly not true. Everyone is not the same. Everyone's walk is not the same. Many desire help without running into brick walls. Many of these agencies, unfortunately, put some single black mothers through an obstacle course in order for them to get much needed assistance. Some agencies need to know their life story before giving help. Why is that? Researching and watching the treatment my mother received firsthand, I know numerous black women that speak up about injustices are labeled as difficult and treated with malice. Even various offices and city officials will cater to a certain ethnic group before catering to many blacks. It's biased and unfair. For many to favor a certain group of minorities over another group of minorities just doesn't make sense, because at the end of the day, they're both minority, not white. Various underprivileged areas won't have many job centers, but will have liquor centers for many to run to daily because the pain is real for many in underserved communities. That was designed years ago when redlining was created. There are so many stereotypes of the projects that aren't true. There's many black and brown single mothers and others that live in the hood that don't sit home all day and watch Maury. Many black and brown mothers in the projects make it happen. There's some hard-working fathers too that didn't leave their family. That's another stereotype. Every black man doesn't leave their family. Even though it's supposed to be low-income housing, many residents don't pay low-income rent prices. Everyone that lives in housing apartments don't pay $10 for rent. Unfortunately, some renters in the PJs pay Manhattan-style rent prices, even though several maintenance, management, and the outside environment are far from upscale. Why is it that many that live in low-income housing don't pay low-income rent? When the tenant gets a raise at work, the housing authority wants a raise too, even though they didn't work for it. That's crazy as hell. This situation alone would break many and make them feel, what's the point of trying when you can't get ahead? Society wants many in poverty to work, yet when some work, they don't see the fruits of their labor. The housing authority want many residents' whole paycheck. This is comparable to the treatment of many newly liberated slaves long ago. Even when they were freed, democratic slave masters didn't want to lose their free labor. They didn't want slaves to succeed. When it came to sharecropping, many African Americans were criminalized, even lynched, for not following protocols of the so-called work method. Sharecropping disenfranchised large numbers of free slaves through forms of terrorism and abuse. The racially discriminatory treatment came along with no opportunity for blacks to advance. This system left large numbers of blacks in debt, owing the slave master turned boss forever. In basic terms, sharecropping was a method for democratic white slave owners to profit from the labor of numerous liberated blacks. The newly freed slaves thought it was a deal, and it turned out to be the worst mistake. Many prior slave owners took total advantage, making numerous freed slaves rent the tools, rent the land, grow the land, plus take large percentages of their crops. All the hard work the freed slaves put in, yet never was able to get ahead. The more crops, the more the massa wanted. Blacks that challenged this unfairness were ostracized, abused, even lynched. Insane how it seems so familiar in the Brick Plantation Authority today. Today, instead of Mr. White Man throwing many blacks away in some housing authorities, it's Mr. and Mrs. Black and Brown doing the damage. Many of the housing authority workers that threw my family away had tactics and attitudes very similar to the Django's Stephen, the house slave that loved to see other blacks struggle in pure delight. My family was treated like a junkyard dog by these Stephen project managers and other Stevens within BHA. What's interesting is there was so much unnecessary evilness we endured and continue to endure that it makes me feel so bad for various black residents left on the Brick Plantation that have no voice. My mother, a strong black woman with tons of faith in God, through the pain, used her voice and stood her ground. The consequences were heinous. They did us wrong, and we left the plantation. She had to protect me, and the Stevens brought all the discriminatory racist hell and fury her way. These individuals made things 10 times worse. Black on black hate is a real thing. It should not be ignored. Many residents in the housing authority plantations don't stand a chance with many in power that act like Stephen. There are many Stevens in the world, and that's sad to know. It's all shameful. The various Stevens didn't care about me, a child then and during that malicious ordeal. They just didn't care. These workers were bullies with no regard, just like Stephen. I learned it's not always Mr. White Man doing the damage. These individuals, the same color as me, threw us away better than the white man ever would. Even though the many evil Stevens of the housing authority didn't mind tormenting us, God made a way. Yet through it all, my mother always told me, we are in it, but we're never of it. She constantly tells me that we could never blend in when we're supposed to succeed and stand out. We got off the plantation. God will get the glory for our story. I say all this to say thank you, Mr. Bell, and to the many others that are shining a spotlight on the youth in the projects that are dealing with lousy ordeals they don't deserve. No child deserves to live in chaotic, hazardous conditions inside the apartment in the hood. Thank you, Mr. Bell, for your transparency. Telling your story takes humility and honesty. I, like Mr. Bell, will exceed all expectations. I also appreciate your collaboration with the governor candidate. The man has been helping you for years, and it seems he is still vilified for doing the right thing. Mr. Bell, thank you for showing that it doesn't matter what position a man holds. As long as he is contributing to the cause to better black and brown youth, that's all the goal is. Isn't that what many are aiming for? Is it necessary for the numerous blacks in poverty to vote in one direction? Is it the law or something? Even Reverend Al Sharpton, who is closely affiliated with a particular political party, had harsh words for the party in which he is a member of. Is it true that many impoverished blacks in urbanized communities have been neglected and left behind by this certain party for years? Is it cool to be loyal to something that's not loyal to you? I've done some research and discovered that many blacks in the most impoverished, hard-hit areas are devoted to the same political party. Is this working out for urbanized communities? Why are thousands of children subjected to this type of living in the PJs and in hoods of America? I witnessed the chaotic conditions as a child firsthand. My family is still dealing with racially charged bullies that are determined to create chaos in our lives. Where is someone to listen to the screams of the youngsters that feel pain with no hope? In reality, does a hardworking black man from suburbia Greenwich have the same thoughts as a hardworking black man from the hood? It's so confusing. I know Reverend Al is respected and listened to by many in the hood, and he's even saying something's just not right. The only way out of any of this chaos is to turn to God. Mr. Harry Bell, You're doing a great job, and I hope to sit with you soon and talk. Thanks for showing many black and brown youth that they can have a positive thought despite the environment around them. You're showing many you didn't compromise, you didn't make excuses, and you made it happen through God's grace. Tune into another episode of Drag to America. Make sure to wash your hands a million times and spray Lysol everywhere. I'm Ty Worldwide. Take care. God bless.
Can you please, I know you've done it a lot.
No.
Can you explain to white woke leaders, can you explain to them that they're not only losing white dudes in the upper Midwest, they're losing people of color?
They're losing people of color because they really don't get the people of color's life. If you are living in a city, in a neighborhood that is inundated with crime, and you act like that is not an issue, you've already lost me. It is an issue. Yes, we must deal with policing. I've been out front of that. But you cannot ignore when 12-year-old kids who somebody's niece and neighbor is killed, and you act like that's a non-issue because you're too elitist to live on the ground. We don't want to be manipulated by right-wing elitist billionaires or by left-wing guys that don't understand our life on the ground, that is living in fear of crime, that is living as a result of inflation that is killing us. Many parts of this country, we need gas to go to work. These beltway elitists, these limousine liberals here in New York, don't live in the real world, and blacks have to, and browns have to deal with the real world every day, and we don't sit in crowded subways reading left-wing or right-wing propaganda.